Hi guys, and welcome back to the Woke Weekly podcast. Again, I'm joined with,
Rashida.
Ade.
Kezia.
and today we're here to discuss black issues that affect our communities, and we're gonna start with reverse colorism. So, as you guys would probably know,
She laughed already.
as you guys probably know, colorism is something that exists within our community and is essentially when preferential treatment is given to people of fairer skin that are closer to whiteness. It's not just within our communities; it's also structural as well. You tend to find you tend to see more fairer skin actors and more fairer skin black people in positions of power. So the question today is that reversed within our communities? Do people of darker skin get preferential treatment? And that's kind of what we're here to discuss. So who wants to say something? I mean, Rashida's laughing. So.
I think she needs to start off.
Oh my God. Like I said, it's not a thing, Gretchen. Stop trying to make it a thing. No, okay. So obviously colorism is like I feel like whenever people talk about reverse anything as it pertains to power, it's normally some nonsense. Like reverse racism.
No, genuinely.
Reverse colorism, reverse sexism. It's like privileged people trying to express the woes of the perceived woes of their privilege. I don't think it's a thing. I think obviously the issue of colorism is deeply nuanced. I think it is also deeply gendered. I think colorism affects men differently to how it affects women. I think darker skinned women have a more difficult time than darker skinned men. I think darker skinned men are often kind of perceived as like the pinnacle of like black masculinity. They're hypersexualized in a way that is problematic. But in terms of kind of popular culture, whether it's films or the kind of selling of sex in that way, I think black women get a more difficult time than
darker skin women.
Dark skinned black women, get a more difficult time than dark skinned black men. So I think the issue is nuanced, and I guess I'd be interested to hear what other people have to say, but I do reject the notion that lighter skinned people have a more difficult time than darker skinned people.
Wait, so you're saying... Oh, sorry. Go on.
I think even in terms of the word reverse in itself, I think reverse implies some sort of like equal exchange or equal consequence, which just isn't. If we're gonna go through this topic and we're gonna dissect a lot of things, but I think ultimately we're gonna find that the experiences that lighter skinned black people experience cannot equate or cannot be equated to the experiences that darker skinned black people
Oh, so
face.
you're saying there's no comparison because it's worse for darker skinned people?
I do think it is worse. I think whether the extent we can establish and we can gauge throughout this conversation, but I think the main point that I'm trying to make is that reverse implies an equal exchange in consequences or in results, and I don't think there is an equal there is an equal result or consequence in what it's like to live in the skin of a dark-skinned black person compared to what it's like to live in the skin of a lighter-skinned black person. I
hear that. I think Rashida hit the nail on the head when she said something about black men. So obviously, I can only really come at an angle of what I've experienced. And for us, obviously, growing up, it was obviously always the light-skinned guys that people would go for, etc., etc.
The summer of 012, of vicious,
No,
of vicious year. Oh, vicious year.
Oh,
for black
friend.
And then I don't know when, but something like just clicked. It switched. Instead of like girls going for light skinned guys, they'll see the light skinned guys as the babies.
Yeah,
it's soft.
like seen as growing up and
darker
skin.
Yeah. So what they would do is they wouldn't even go for people that are brown skinned. They would go for dark skinned guys. They want a really masculine dark skinned guy, like what you said, because it seems to embody black masculinity. And I think obviously structurally, if we're talking about the structures in society, of course, society and the systems we live under will always favour people of lighter skin. That's just the way it is. But I think internally, culturally, and I think to a certain degree within pop culture, you can see that kind of having darker skin was a bit of a trend, like I'm trying to say. And obviously, you could even argue that it was kind of to combat colorism we see systematically. But I still think that to a certain extent, darker skinned women at a certain point in time were put on a pedestal.
So
And darker skinned men as well.
I see what you're saying. I think, do you know what? I think kind of in the
TL
wake
now.
of with that
Like now.
we have
No,
that.
I'm not even talking about now. But
there was a
there
time.
was a time, yeah. especially when people just moved from like focusing so much attention on light skinned women and light skinned men, they just switched. Right. I'm not too sure about men focusing their attention on dark skinned women. I don't think that really happened. But definitely with men, the attention definitely switched. Yeah. Like you saw women that would go for light skinned guys that would be gassing up light skinned guys, just saying, "No, I want a dark chocolate." What's the expression, man?
Dark chocolate is bitter as well, you know. It's never nice.
No, to be honest.
No.
I want a darky chocolate. I want a darky chocolate man. I want a 6'5". Yeah, your friend's gonna matter.
I thought that was like my psychology, bruv. I didn't know.
And even we could even get into this conversation about height, fam, because more time. Obviously it's a bit of a time.
That's another conversation.
No. It's not. No, I'm gonna link it back. But I think the same way that kind of having dark skin embodies black masculinity is the same way that being very tall embodies black masculinity.
But I think masculinity across all.
I think that's probably
male and
I think in terms of the height, that's like an across the board. Like
not
you don't
even.
No, yeah.
Not even.
Ooh,
not
you know
really
how everyone on Love Island, I want someone who's tall, dark, and handsome.
But you know when they say dark, they mean hair.
Yeah, no. But
they mean tan as well. Like,
but in terms of tall, I think that's like that's the thing that probably ranges like across
it's associated with masculinity.
I
think
we've
discussed before how the ways in which masculinity is problematic, and there are all of these various features that are attributed to what it is to be a big strong man, and of course it's complicated by race.
Do you know what it is though? I think because traditionally or genetically black people tend to be quite tall. We grow to a very certain girls will be wanting 6'5" guys.
I feel like certain men from certain
that's normal.
For some of our nations,
some
of our nations aren't particularly tall, bro. Listen,
they're not all tall.
This is what I'm trying to say.
Okay,
we got a few brothers.
So from the last say 3 months or so that I spent living in South Africa, South African men are not tall. Period. Period. There was guys that I was taller than. I'm 5'2".
I swear. What the flip?
Listen, and it happened more than once. So
don't be putting our African brothers on blast like that.
I feel like even some of our Ghanaian men are not necessarily known for being tall.
But don't you think that's because, in fact, with the South African thing, it might be because they're malnourished and that.
No. Do you know what though? Even though it sounds problematic. Listen to me. Even though it sounds mildly problematic, I did attend a conference where stunting was established as a major issue affecting South Africa.
We've got the stats to back us up.
Affecting the growth. I can't lie to you.
It's the stats.
So he was making jokes, but there's a bit of truth in that as well. But yeah, I think. If we're gonna
let's talk about race. I don't know why I'm talking about hat, man.
I think like you're battling something eternally, man.
Relax, bro. Relax.
Confession time.
How tall are you, Toby? Tell the mic. How tall are you?
I'm 5'11".
Yeah. Really?
Just about. Do you know
what
it is?
When
I put them Tims on,
you don't know he was lying.
Personally, growing up, height was never really a problem. Like, I was never really the shortest guy. I was never really the tallest guy, innit? Obviously, there's guys out there that, they have a hard time.
No, my friend does say that. He's about 5'8"-ish, and he always says that. He always says, like,
that's a problem.
Black women don't like me because I'm short.
No, I can't lie.
I went to a birthday.
You can't be making them kind of excuses, bro. You need to back yourself, man.
I went to a birthday party yesterday, and we both kind of know the girl. But he didn't get invited, and he was like, "I bet you would invite me if I was tall." Hey,
listen, let's go back to this race thing. Let's go back to this race thing.
Okay, back to colorism. Let's get into it. This supposed. I think also what we need to think about when it comes to colorism, I actually wrote this down. It's derived from racism. It's the internalized racism that manifests and that results in the preferential treatment of lighter skinned people compared to darker skinned black people. And then I just kind of want to put the question to you. So I think, that we can see that there's kind of two actors happening here. So you've got the main racism, which now fathers the colorism. And that is through, the stereotypes and the kind of attributations made to darker skin. Could we say that there's an equivalent in terms of what white supremacy and what racism has told us to fear and to suspect and to judge lighter skinned black people on, that darker skinned black people can now use and weaponize to diminish lighter skinned people?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think when she said reverse, I thought you had a problem with the word reverse. I don't like that word reverse anything. colorism is like, it's colorism. To me, I don't think there has to be a specific power dynamic if you're being discriminated against because of, you know, you're being lighter or darker. It's just colorism. It doesn't have to be reverse or backwards or, you know, upside down colorism. To me, that's just colorism. Colorism is colorism.
So you think there is a form of colorism where lighter skinned people are disadvantaged?
I guess in certain regard, I don't know if it's like that deep. If you're talking about like dating and stuff, if a girl doesn't like want to go out with you because she prefers a dark skin, I don't think that's like, you know, get like, you know, tribunal out to, to discuss
fair.
it. But it happens, but I don't think it's that big of a...
I think the main thing
an
that
issue.
I seem to hear, and I guess, you know, people who are hearing can obviously, who are listening can tune in and give their own opinions, but what I hear in terms of when we're talking about this supposed reverse colorism is mainly through the frame of maybe mixed race people being told that they're not black enough. And that seems to be kind of the main issue and this sort of colorism that is talked about. And I'll give an example of the singer Tinashe. And she was, she did an interview and kind of talked about her sort of like limited success so far. And then she also talked about the fact that she was half Zimbabwean and half Danish, and how she's kind of been made to feel like other black people, how she was never black enough. And I don't know, that seems to be the frame through which this kind of colorism argument is presented, but I don't really see that as colorism necessarily, because inevitably your experiences as a mixed race woman, as a lighter skinned woman, there are going to be some differences.
Oh, man.
But you
And
do
they-
get
I
like
think
skin black people.
to a certain degree, I think you just gotta allow it, man. Bro, when you have a platform like that, to be saying that you having fair skin held you back, that's a bit.
Yeah, I think that's
That's a
nonsense.
bit- that's a bit of a
I remember when I
stretch,
heard that,
No,
I
but
was
I think,
like,
no, I think maybe she's
girl.
talking about, she might be talking about being feeling involved, because you do get that with light skinned black people
Yeah,
as well.
but then
in
that's
terms
Nah,
of being
man.
mixed race and maybe an identity conflict, I think that's slightly different from saying your career has been stagnated because you have a lighter complexion.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, about the career, I don't know. I
That to
don't know.
me is
that's what, when we're talking about
It's foolishness.
colorism and we're talking about it being a kind of seed of racism, I think we also need to talk about colorism beyond, because a lot of it is kind of discussed around beauty and desirability and
I guess so,
attractability
yeah.
to men, but then there's also kind of socio-economic implications, there's health implications. I think they said there was a study from the University of Chicago, and this study was done in 2015, and they said that socioeconomic and health inequality among African Americans within the colour continuum is similar or larger in magnitude than the disparities that exist between white and black people.
Oh, wow.
And I think that's it's really important for us to
That's
move
crazy.
beyond the discussion of
Desirability,
desirability and
absolutely.
attractiveness and who wants to have sex with who to, you know, those socioeconomic, those health implications. And can we say that, could we really truly and accurately say that lighter skinned people suffer an economic disadvantage, suffer a social disadvantage, suffer a health disadvantage from being distinguished as light skinned?
yeah.
I haven't seen anything that
Yeah,
said so personally.
to be fair with you, yeah, like we said from the beginning, structurally they don't really face that much problems, and obviously we could say that this stems from like racism, which kind of came about during the transatlantic slave trade, all of that. But you could also argue that this has existed before that, pre that, because in India, so they had a caste system, and obviously it's part of kind of Indian society and culture.
That's contested though. There are loads of Indian scholars who argue that European colonialists, the British, magnified the caste system to fit their own desires. There was definitely a caste system in place,
but then
but it
people
wasn't
said
as
that before.
rigid.
But people say
colonialists made it out
yeah,
to
of course,
be.
no, the colonialists definitely exploited the caste system. What I'm saying is that pre-colonialism, they had the caste system, and within the caste system, they had different kind of levels to it. And the darker you were in skin, the more lower you were on the caste. And obviously, it was more to do with the fact that if you were quite dark in skin, it meant that you spent a lot of the time
It's
on the
about
field.
trade, yeah.
On the field, do you know what I'm trying to say? It was more about trade.
I think I do agree with you definitely about your point about colorism kind of predating colonialism, but kind of being exacerbated and being experienced in the way that we as modern people and in modern society experience it. You have kind of the example of the Japanese culture and the geishas who would paint their faces white with birds droppings to be more fair and attractive. There's examples of colorism in the ancient Aztec community. Egyptian society with the ancient Egyptians often depicted women as lighter than men because a lighter fair-skinned woman was attractive. And then in this article that I read, there was a chief from the north, the traditional North American tribes, the Hopi tribe, who would, I think one of their kind of quotes and one of the things that they were saying was that women with darker skin may be half man. And so that's women with darker skin may be half man. And that was kind of a quote. It's a lot. But that's just to kind of say that, you know, colorism has existed in other cultures pre-colonialism, but the way that we experience it today, I think, is massively impacted and affected by colonialism, by the transatlantic slave trade, and kind of all the implications and all the consequences of that.
I think how far back it goes to show that there's not really much we can do about it in that regard. So when you talk about that disparity in terms of, you know, economic or social factors, stuff like that, there's not much anyone can do about that. There's not really much one person or a few people or a few programs that favor. Are we going to have a program that favors like what darker skinned people and start checking it, you know, against some kind of color scale? We're not gonna have. They're not gonna have that kind of stuff. So
cut up a palette.
Yeah, exactly. Have a palette or something. So there's not really
the reverse paper bag.
So there's not really much we can do about it, which I do find that in many issues like this as well. Like it goes far back, you know, thousands of years ago, and when you start to, you know, delve into it, sometimes we don't really know where it began, where it came from. The idea, even like when we talk about patriarchy, or, you know, it just happened to be that our species, you know, the male are the dominant ones. You have some species of animals that the females are the dominant ones. And again, no one knows where that comes from sometimes. So if we don't really know where it comes from, how are we going to, you know, address it in that way?
Just to touch on what you said, yeah. Have you heard about, I'm not sure how many of you might know about hyenas.
Yes.
You know they have a matriarchy.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know hyenas.
Yeah, you should. I
did.
So it's a thing where the women are the more dominant ones, and also their genitalia is shaped like a penis.
Really?
Yeah, it's shaped like a penis, and it's a thing where they basically can't be raped because they can open. So obviously the men they're bigger and they bully the men. Like in hyena society, the men are at the bottom. Like even the children of the alpha male or alpha female, is superior to the men in the clan.
Yeah, I mean you get that in snakes. Even in snakes, like they're sometimes much bigger than the males, like much bigger, where they can dominate.
I guess we can kind of dissect the histories and you know, the origins of this colorism, but there's a very kind of distinctive and identifiable way in which it impacts us as young people in the society that we're living in today. And I also think that, you know, we can address that. We can't address what the origins are, and we can't address why it came about, but we can address the impact that it has today, and we can kind of, I think we do have a capacity to kind of continue to shift mindsets and to get people talking and thinking. And even what you described in terms of this shift of, like, because I remember 2008, 2012, it was the Hot Spice pages and the light-skinned girls and Peck and Piffies. And
when you get added onto that, you're like,
yes,
sir.
The Chingford Chungtings, like all of that. So, like that's just to say that, you know, like you said, there's been a shift from that to people now being like, yeah, like dark-skinned people, wow, this is that and a third. And you know what? I honestly think a part of that is kind of trying to overcompensate for that time where we did have this very colorist mindset.
Yeah, I guess so.
And I think that kind of like enthusiasm and that zeal comes whenever someone is experiencing a change in mindset. When, you know, they come from thinking one thing and then they've kind of been educated and enlightened to think in a different way, they're then now, you know, very zealous and keen to share that and to reflect that, to be like, yeah, dark-skinned people, this amazing chocolate, truffle, souffle, every kind of dessert that you possibly describe.
But you even have pictures of when you pour chocolate on dark-skinned people.
Ade, you see what you said? Ade, you see what you just said about how like men are more dominant. You don't know why.
Yeah.
I just want to ask you. I want to change the topic.
Oh, did I face change?
My face be moving the chair.
I just want to know in it, like,
he's down for it again.
Because I want to change. We're gonna move on in it, so I just wanted to know if there's. Did you agree with that statement?
Do you want to hit me
I
with
think
something?
it would. the way you presented it was like this was just all one big accident, and we just ended up here. And I don't really feel like
You don't think that was it? You don't
No,
think that was
not
the
really.
case?
Do you know what it
There's
is though?
definitely
Do you know
been
what it is? Do you know what it is?
engineering, like
Right.
the way society is.
Just a-
it's
just
not
a-
just by nature.
just
There's
a
things
bit-
that have been
No,
No,
It's
but
just
just to be
engineered.
factually, just to add a bit of facts, like genetically speaking, obviously men are physically kind of built.
Yeah, that doesn't explain
Wait, hold
why
on, hold
they
on.
are, yeah.
But then in terms of intelligence, there's no disparity between
I know.
a male and female in terms of
I
intellect.
know, but my point was we don't know where it comes from. I wasn't saying that to say that that's why they don't. When you said about the hyenas, that's the physical thing might explain, But
Yeah,
my
yeah.
point was to say that we don't know where it comes from. Like,
Yeah, we don't.
It's very
Still,
strange in
we
that
don't.
way.
We don't. But yeah, let's talk about selling costs. See, Adi, this was your
But wait,
topic,
to
innit?
conclude, to
Okay.
tie it all together,
Well,
do we each I think we should go around. Does each person think reverse
alright, cool. Keep it
colorism
quick though.
is a
Like,
thing?
I just don't like the word reverse. That's it. That's just me.
I've been saying there's not a thing.
I think it exists in like culture and pop culture, but not structurally. Like,
Right.
yeah, not structurally. It doesn't.
I don't think it exists.
Not even in like
Babe.
culturally. Not even culturally.
Like, aside from some people saying, "Oh, I don't want to date a light skinned guy because they're too feminine or they're too whatever."
That's colorism though.
Innit?
Like,
we're trying
but-
to diminish
let's
the
not get into
experiences.
it.
Trying
Let's-
to diminish the
let's-
experiences.
like-
Wow.
Let's move on in it.
Wow.
like, there's more serious things.
And we're
Yeah,
talking
well,
about
it's
power,
true.
we're talking about real power structures. When we talk about racism, when we talk about colorism,
Fair enough.
we're talking about the reality of how people, as Kezia said, how people's lives are impacted by the comments that are made. People's lives
Could
are
be
not
upsetting
just-
to
people-
hear.
right for an individual.
That'd upset me.
But when
No,
you
but you know what it is?
when you enter into the world and into public space, it makes no difference.
It is trivial. It is
So,
trivial, but
everyone's fine.
Some people are still struggling. So let's move on. Yeah.
Sorry,
So,
then.
The question is, we should abolish all prisons. And you propose this topic. Why should we
did.
abolish?
You
all
be
prisons?
proposing hella topics, isn't it?
I come with smoke.
Come
with
on.
smoke. Let's go. Let's go.
We love to see
I
it.
thought about it. I was thinking about this for a while, and I'm not gonna give you the brief history of it. I should give you a brief history, but basically, the way I thought of it, the sum of it was basically the fact that prisons are state institutions, and so because they're state institutions, I do not believe, and they're a form of violence, in my opinion. They're very violent places, so I don't believe the state should be in a position to exact violence on people for whatever they've done, no matter how bad it is. The state should have a very I don't know if it's amoral. That's the opposite, isn't it? What's the word called when you don't really have a moral position or something?
Amoral?
No, amoral is when. That is it. I did
Yeah,
say that.
amoral,
Yeah.
yeah.
The state should have a very amoral position in terms of
prisoners.
justice. No, not
Okay.
prisons. In terms of justice. So if someone does something very bad, the state shouldn't say we're gonna do violence to them to punish them or to exact any form, because it's not even justice really, to exact any form of justice. That's basically my position.
So what should the state do?
Or
Someone
who
commits
should
a
be
crime.
responsible for exacting that justice?
Justice is not exacted in that way. That's not how justice.
No, wait,
arrives
hold
at.
on. So just in a practical term, let's say I commit a crime. I'm a murderer.
Yeah.
What should the state do to me if there's no prisons?
Well, I mean, that's the conversation I'm trying to start because I'm not. wait. I'm not. I have some opinions depending on what it is, but I'm not. No, I'm not. I haven't.
You're not a policymaker.
Well, I mean, I can be. For the right price.
Hey, Mr. Owen and burn down the capitalist. Boy, you don't get out of here.
Don't put it out there. I'm trying to sabotage it from the inside. Subvert. Becoming low. Becoming quiet.
Change from the inside.
Yeah, change from the
Change
inside.
from the
Yeah, burn it down from the
Right.
inside.
Do you know what
man.
it is? Do you know what it is?
How
yeah?
many of us thought we could do that?
No, I'm trying to burn it down. I'm trying to change it. I'm trying to burn it down.
I feel like it's an interesting topic here because obviously we can get into the conversation about should prisons really be more about punishment or should it really be more about integration and rehabilitating the people that commit the crimes. And I think currently, especially with the way the Conservative government is kind of going, it's going to become more about punishment and less about rehabilitation. But the question you have to ask, can many of these criminals even be rehabilitated?
Of course.
I think
Do you think
definitely.
every criminal that's committed a crime can be? Because some, I can't lie, they can't. Like when you look at the
Maybe
cases,
not every
you'll be like,
single
"Oof."
one, but I think there's probably more capacity for rehabilitation than the government thinks, than these private prison companies think, and then they allow us to think. But it's just that the issue is that rehabilitation, it's going to be very costly. It's going to be very timely. And, in the system of capitalism, you do things for the least cost.
It's actually cheaper in a lot
in
of
the
regards,
quickest
right?
in the quickest manner that you can do it. I think that in terms of prison abolition, I feel like there's I believe more in the points for it than the points kind of against it. This is a topic I've had to
So
kind of
you want
familiarize
to
myself.
abolish prisons?
I think I'd lean towards more abolishing prisons.
So what would
than
you have
not.
instead? Detention centres? Like what?
I think that you can't. So with prisons, I guess maybe if we're going to identify what the objectives of a prison are, you punish someone in an attempt to deter them from reoffending and to deter other people, kind of from offending, but inevitably either way you end up being back inside a society, and I feel like it doesn't make sense to put people in this prison and not show them what a model society should be like and teach them how to act accordingly in this model society that we are trying to attain. You can't put someone in inhumane conditions where they're earning £4 a week and expect
They earn
them
money
to
in prison.
Peanuts, if you do.
Yeah. So there
Slave
are
labour.
some
Money, yeah.
there are some
Put that
wages. So
in.
I've got a few of them down now. So full time on a minimum wage is £4 a week.
£4 a week if you're in pen.
Yeah.
That's chicken change.
And they're working every day.
And
How
if
do you
you
make it
and they're
on-
working like 16-hour days. If you're working in a private company run workshop, you could earn £25 a week, but that's a quite rare instance. If someone can't work because they're ill or they have old age, then they would earn £3.25 a week. Asylum seekers who are being held in asylum kind of detention centres, £1.25 per hour.
The
And
flip?
a
Hey,
wing
this is criminal, bruv.
a
How
wing
can you be
cleaner.
paying? But why are you paying people that are in prison lower in wage when they're doing the same work?
But
I don't
that's the
understand that.
point. Like, you're not teaching people to be. If you're trying to rehabilitate people or trying to at the end of a prison sentence, unless it's like a life or something or death penalty, people are gonna end up being back inside society, and you can't teach someone how to behave and how to engage in a model society if you don't create those conditions and those environments for them to learn.
But
how
then,
to
but
do
then
that.
my whole thing is that I agree with what you're saying, but I think the focus shouldn't really be on. Obviously, we need to rehabilitate criminals, but the focus should be more on preventing those people from going into prison in the first place.
And
what-
how
what
do we
does
do
look
that?
like?
Pardon? I think prison should always be the last resort.
Right.
Like, I'm trying to say, like, the majority of people that are put in prison aren't the vast majority of them don't pose a threat to ordinary
Yeah,
people.
most people are in prison for
non-violent crimes. Yeah, do you get what I'm trying to say? So these people don't pose any severe threat to the public. And if that is a fact, then maybe we should like.
But the thing is that even for them to not end up in prison, for them to not be there in the first place, there's a requirement for investment in the social, in the welfare.
Yeah, 100%.
Which
It needs to be
isn't
tough on the causes
happening,
of crime.
and which is why
Absolutely,
it's the
yeah.
causes of crime. I think, like you said, this Tory government, they're very much focused on
Punishment.
you did this thing, we're gonna punish you for it, but we're not gonna address the reasons that led you to do that thing that you did.
Yeah,
because if we're
because-
thinking about it,
because-
if we look at rich people, first of all, they probably have all the opportunities and all the money and all the access that they wouldn't need to create to commit a crime. But should they commit a crime, they can bail themselves
Nah,
out.
let me tell
they
you
can
this,
pay
yeah.
their ways out.
Yeah, let me
of
tell you
the,
this:
out
prison
of the
doesn't
system.
exist for rich people.
It doesn't.
Prison
It
is a
doesn't.
holiday.
We're gonna have this conversation. You know?
Yeah, prison is a holiday for
And-
rich
and
people. Let's be-
that's
especially
why-
in America. Especially
Exactly.
these so-called prisons. Yeah, are run by private institutions.
Mm-hmm.
They have like tennis courts. Bro,
I
they're
think when
chilling.
you ask the question about
No, I was just gonna say, just to like contribute to everything that everybody said already, we need to be aware that prisons are not these neutral spaces. They are disproportionately filled with black and brown bodies. They are disproportionately filled with men. They are disproportionately filled with people who have had care experience, who have grown up in some kind of care system. Disproportionately filled
Yeah,
with
that's true.
people who come from more economically disadvantaged positions.
Backgrounds.
And so, like you said, the causes of crime, we can't ignore all of those
Yeah,
things.
we
We can't
can't.
look at the institution of prison in a vacuum. It is part of this wider system of inequality that we've been talking about. And it's those things that I think need to be addressed. And as we've mentioned, like this, the proliferation of these private prison companies, the prison industrial complex,
Yeah.
is creating a situation whereby it is beneficial for these prison companies to have prisoners. That's how they generate income. They need prisoners to proliferate their business.
Yeah.
And so that's a really dangerous place for us to be in, I think.
When you talked about when you were asking a question like that should be legal, then paying them less, that goes back to we're talking about being black and brown people in there. The 13th Amendment said,
Yeah.
abolishing slavery.
Abolish slavery, but allowed it in prisons.
Exactly.
And like you could argue that
Exactly.
prisons is basically the continuation of slavery in another form.
Exactly.
Because essentially, as soon as they did that, they basically made blackness a crime.
So they can throw you in jail for jaywalking. Like, you can't get bail, no due process rights. You're there for 3 years, and then you have to work in your slave labor.
And just
camp.
on that as well, we know black and brown bodies are disproportionately surveilled. So a lot of this is about surveillance. Who is being watched in the first place? Where are there police cars? Where is there CCTV? In which communities are there police cars all over the place in order to catch people? What privileged groups aren't surveilled as much
And the crimes
as
committed.
as
We have a
non-privileged
prime
groups.
minister who's like actually admitted to consuming cocaine.
Class
and-
A drugs. And you know what's mad
What
as well?
has happened?
The crimes committed.
Nothing.
Yeah, the crimes typically committed by people with a lot of wealth. You tend to see the sentences are a lot less severe. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I'd say...
And when sorry to
sorry.
interrupt, when black and brown people do commit white collar crimes, they bear the brunt of these things. So when there was all these scandals to do with the banks and journalists and all of that stuff that was happening, it wasn't rich white people that went to jail for these crimes. It was black and brown people in these institutions that went to jail for things that white people had been doing the whole time. So there's this series.
News of the world, they hack
I can't
people's
remember what it's
phones.
Yeah,
These people hack people, and barely any of these journalists
Yeah,
went to
I think
prison.
that's what you and I were talking about the other day when I was saying this is kind of how I reached these conclusions. The crimes that are committed in our society that are the real big deals, the people that commit those crimes, they're having good times. When you look at, I wrote a blog on my blog things. I don't want to plug it. I'm not going to do that.
Plug it!
Black Politics is on WordPress.
Come
Check
on.
it out.
Black
Yeah.
Politics.
So I wrote about this. I think it was chapter 29, comparing Ted Bundy. You guys are gonna laugh at this. Barack Obama. I don't really like him.
Ted
yes.
Bundy and
Barack Obama. So I compared the fact that because there was a film.
Ted Bundy.
Because there was a film
Serial killer.
because there was a film that came out about Ted
no.
Bundy. I think it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Netflix show.
Was it?
yeah.
Are you talking
The
about
Netflix
Ted Bundy
one.
tapes? The
No,
one
the
on
Netflix one, the Cunning, Evil and Shocking and Vile or something like that.
I know. what
Yeah,
you
that
mean,
was the one. Yeah, so that was what I wrote about, and then it was the fact about how I think there was a big uproar about how they were lionizing this guy, and he's so horrible, he's so crazy. How can they be glorifying how good looking he was or whatever it was?
Yeah.
And it made me realize when you compare someone like Ted Bundy to Obama, Ted Bundy killed I think it was about 33 people. The people Obama has killed probably 10,000 times more than Ted Bundy has killed. But not only does
Just for
Obama
the
not even
benefit-
get charged, this guy is like
Just
one
for-
of
just
the
for
best people in our
benefit-
society.
Just for the benefit of viewers, what do you mean by Obama's killed 1,000 people? Because some people will be like, what were you talking about?
Okay. Let me put it to you in this case. I'm not gonna give you the numbers on it, but let me give you a direct
No,
case.
but like
Obama said
yeah.
said when he was president.
I wish Obama would.
Turns out I'm really good at killing people. Obama ordered assassinations. Like he said, I want this guy, like a mafia boss. I want this guy killed, and they killed him. Obama killed U.S. citizens. Yeah, actual, not only people are brown people no one cares about. Actual U.S. citizens. And again, this ties into whole racism kind of
But
stuff.
why did he kill them? They weren't innocent people.
Yes, they were.
obviously-
Yes, they were. Obama studied law at Harvard. Where's the due process? Where was the court that tried them and the jury of their peers that convicted them? Who accused them? What was the crime they were accused of? In fact, one of them was a 16-year-old boy. I don't know if you guys know this. His name was Abdul Rahman Al-Awlaki. 16-year-old boy. His dad was apparently some kind of Muslim cleric or something like that. So even if the dad was some kind of cleric preaching something, what's a 16-year-old boy got to do with it? And then Trump, last year, 2 years ago, I think it was, did a raid in Yemen that killed his 8-year-old sister. Now, because Obama had done it, the media couldn't say, oh, how dare Trump do that? Obama was the one starting to do it in the first place. Two of them, two Americans.
But I think what you're trying to touch on is obviously America. Obama, while he was president of America, obviously, started wars.
Well,
in Syria
no,
and all that.
no,
And
no.
people died. Is that basically?
No,
what
not
you're
only that. I think when you look at the mentality of these people, these are the real psychopaths in our society. These are the people we need to be keeping away from us. These are the people that look at other countries and say, let's destroy them. Why? To steal their resources. We already have millions or billions, but we're going to ruin the lives of millions of people and put them in utter misery just to make, the third quarter profits look good. That's psychopathy. That's crazy people. These are the people that ruin their own societies. And not only those brown people. They do it to their own people first. They're going to say, we're going to have austerity. What does that mean? You're working 3-4 jobs, no bad wages, no time for yourself, no time for family. Only crazy people, psychopaths, run societies like this. Not only do we have these people out there walking the streets, they're leading our society. So how can you have a society where you say, oh, this guy killed 30 people, he's the worst person in the world, when you have people that line us into war to make billions, they can't even spend it.
We could bring it closer to home and you could talk about Tony Blair.
Oh yeah. You and I talked about Tony Blair. This is why you and I have this argument about Keir Starmer and all these neoliberals.
Yeah.
Because these people are not our friends. They should be the ones in prison. So you're talking about prison. I don't favor prison generally. I think they should go. But if you're talking about people that should be in prisons, the crimes people like Ted Bundy and people, in fact, if anything, you can say, if I'm gonna go here, Ted Bundy, you can say he has an excuse because he's a psychopath. These people have no excuses. They haven't got mental illnesses.
So how do you know they're not psychopaths? You could argue.
You're right. There you go. They should be, and those they shouldn't be, presidents of our countries. They should be, locked away somewhere getting help. So when these kind of people are not in prison, we can't be talking about someone stealing, or selling cocaine in prison. That's small potatoes compared to the real crimes we have. Have been going on for a long time. So.
No. I think you touched on a lot of interesting things. Personally, I don't think that. I feel like when people are in positions of power, you have to make decisions for the interests of your country. And obviously, some of those decisions are tough decisions.
Which country? Which people in the country?
I mean,
that's a good question.
You can make that argument as well, yeah. But my thing is that, of course, all of us would probably disagree that Tony Blair should never have invaded Iraq, and that whole war was illegal.
War criminal.
I would
arrest him.
I wouldn't go as far to say he's a war criminal.
Of course he wouldn't.
I think personally, I think that with the information,
Kiss, I'm a fanboy over here.
I think that with the intelligence he was given, he acted in the best interest of the country. I think he was wrong to do it.
What do you mean by that, though? What does that mean? When you say the country, do you mean like a poor woman in Liverpool trying to live off welfare and work 2 jobs, or do you mean like BAE Systems? Like, is that the country? Like, which country are you talking about? The poor people that sent their kids to war to die in a war of lies, or people that sat back far away from it and made all the money off it. Which country is that?
Alright, you know what? Yeah.
I think he makes a good point.
No. You make a very good point that a lot of these wars are being fought.
We need to be very clear about who do these, even when we're talking about these leaders and our governments and our prime ministers and presidents, who do they perceive to be the real citizens
the national interest
of our citizen? Who does the national interest apply to in terms of those people? We've just seen we've seen with the Windrush scandal, we've seen with the deportations of the Jamaican people, that they, despite having spent the most of their lives here, they're paying taxes, they're raising their kids, they're living as citizens. Clearly, whatever is in their national interest doesn't include them because they're not perceived as citizens. So I think it's a very valid question. It's a complex and nuanced question that probably going to take a while to unpack. But I think it's a very good question to start to ask about who does the national interest serve and who do these leaders, in terms of protecting that national interest, who do they see themselves protecting and who do they not?
I agree with everything you guys have said, but I think there's a thing where what people need to understand is that the whole point of neoliberalism, so neoliberalism is a subset of capitalism, right? Because not all capitalists are neoliberalists.
Yeah.
But the whole principle of neoliberalism is that you help the wealth creators. Do you get what I'm trying to say? And eventually the wealth will trickle down to
we know that hasn't happened.
But I don't think that's true. Yeah, no, I don't think that's true. But if you're operating, because when you elect these leaders, you know what they stand for. Tony Blair didn't deny the fact that he was a neoliberal. Neither did Obama.
And people loved it.
No. So and these people said, we are going to make the wealthy wealthier so they can create jobs. We're going to cut their taxes.
That's not what they said.
No.
That's not what
Listen. When to a certain extent, for example, someone like David Cameron was very honest with what he said he would do. He said he was going to make cuts. He was going to cut taxes for the wealthy, and that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, but yeah. I mean,
But wait, hold on.
You're right.
Exactly right. So, but he's basically saying the reason why we're doing this is so that everyone in society will benefit. Do you know what I'm trying to say? And that's what they believe, and that's what allows them to kind of sleep at night. People aren't, I think, naturally just want to help rich people. They think by helping rich people, everyone else in society will benefit. Which isn't true. I agree with you that by cutting taxes on wealthy people, it doesn't benefit the rest of society. But I think from their perspective, that's their worldview, and that's kind of what the neoliberal ideology is.
Okay, I'll say this here. For anyone out there that doesn't know what neoliberalism is, just think of shit and then put sprinkles on it. That's what neoliberalism is. When you have the far right, David Friedman and Milton Friedman. Sorry, not David Friedman. He's the other bad guy. He's a bad guy too, but not Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman, Ayn Rand, and Alan Greenspan.
Adam Smith.
Well, I mean, Adam Smith was a bit, that was a bit before his time. So he wasn't exactly, far. I'm talking about these are the far right economists. These are people that just want to serve you just shit. And then you have, the neoliberals, like you said, they put sprinkles on it and say, doesn't it look better? When you talk about these kind of things, they know what they're doing. They know. I think we were talking earlier about, the fact that they don't see a lot of people that look like them and stuff like that. There is quite a big element of that. A lot of the time, I think there was a debate about, public schools when Labour was running their platform about taxing public schools and you should have taxed them. I think that's one of the reasons they have to go. Because when you don't see people that look like you, it's nothing to you. But a lot of the time, I'm just saying, these people are just crazy, just psychopaths. Do you think they don't know that invading the country is going to be bad? Do you think they don't know that? Do you think they don't know that cutting public services that people use, that's going to be bad? Of course they do. When you see 14 million people in poverty, and you're talking about having an NHS that's an insurance system, when you have 14 million in poverty, you think you can't do the maths?
Who said that?
You think that's what the Conservatives want to do?
No, I'm just arguing. Who said that? I don't think the Conservatives proposed having...
That's what Jeremy Hunt wrote a book about privatising the NHS. What do you think he wrote?
Yeah, Jeremy Hunt wrote the book, but he's not the health secretary. But like...
He was.
I hear what you're saying. Yeah. Obviously, you're very anti-establishment, anti the Conservative
No, it's just the truth.
I'm anti-Conservative as well, but I think... to get back to the topic of prisons...
completely
went on U-turn.
Yeah.
But to just get back to the topic... Really quickly, I think that yes, in a certain sense, prisons needs to be reformed. And I think everyone would say yes, like the current prison system is wrong. We need to reform it. But the difficulty is what kind of reform would actually be beneficial for society and also the criminals. And you also have to think about the victims of these crimes. What kind of trauma would they put through? You know what I'm trying to say?
I think that kind of because that's kind of like one of the utilitarian arguments kind of presented in favor of prisons, that a minority are suffering so that the wider society and the majorities can benefit. But there was another study from Vera Institute of Justice. They're based in New York. And they talk about how socially and economically crippling it is to local communities when you have men who are taken out of these communities and incarcerated. And they estimate that the value of these men is roughly about $25,000. So that's $25,000 that has been taken out of the community, that can't be invested in local businesses, that can't be invested in young people and their development and their growth. And it kind of goes to show that that utilitarian argument isn't necessarily true, because it's not just the life of the prisoner that is being affected. Absolutely. There's families behind that prisoner. If we think about, so the total UK prison population is 83,618 people. That's 83,618 families that are being affected. What are the impacts of having a parent in jail? Are there kids who are ending up in the care system as a result of that? What are the economic implications on a household? What are the implications on access and social mobility? And there's implications that are far more widespread than that individual itself and that crime itself and that direct victim of that specific crime itself. It spans so much wider than that. Yes. And I think it's so important to see that, and then as a result address those socioeconomic issues that lead people to commit crimes in the first place, so that we can kind of avoid that situation. You invest in the social, you invest in the economic of those local communities, you reduce crime, and then there's also a lack of that negative multiplier effect. In geography, we speak of a negative multiplier effect that basically implies generational poverty. So you've got a family that is poor, there's a lack of access, there's a lack of education, there's a lack of money, and because of that is now a burden that is borne on by the poor. And I think prisons exacerbate that negative multiplier effect, and prisons can be a means by which poverty continues to be exacerbated, inequalities continue to be maintained and exist. And I really kind of am in favour in terms of abolishing prisons, so that there's a wider benefit to society. It's going to take a while to get there, and it's probably, I don't know how much it's going to cost to get there, but like I said, it's an example
cheaper than our
of
current system, actually.
No, but I don't think abolishing prisons...
It's an example of what capitalism is. You want to see immediate effects, and you want to get it kind of as quickly as possible for the cheapest price that you can get it.
We're going to have to wrap up soon, yeah, but like, in my opinion, I just don't see what you could put in place of prisons. And I think everyone can accept that prisons need to change, but it's like, what kind of change would that look like?
I think
And I think the issue is just so complex. There's so many parties involved in the prison system. It's very difficult to satisfy everyone.
I just think there's no justice.
And I think
it doesn't serve any of the purpose that it was designed for.
It's also to do with how we see people as well. Like when we see these prisoners, they are just seen as you're the murderer, you're the paedophile, you're the thief. But then so you have the example. There was a Walpole prison uprising in 1973. So the prisoners, I think on the back of there was Kwanzaa had happened, and the black prisoners they were put on lockdown, so they weren't able to celebrate Kwanzaa. Off the back of that, prisoners held a 3-month strike. They didn't do their jobs. They didn't do anything. And then eventually the superintendent of that prison resigned, and their demands for education, for healthcare, for work were met. And because they were met, the prison guards went on strike. And they did that with the aim of kind of with hoping that kind of chaos would ensue. The prisoners would kill each other, would be doing all kinds of nonsense, but that didn't happen. Instead, they established a community. There were people who kind of took care of the medical side of things, people who volunteered for food, who volunteered for cleaning, and they were able to establish a community and a structure. And I think that really speaks to the humanity of people that we're dealing with. We're dealing with humans. Yeah, the entirety of someone's existence isn't that they're a murderer, isn't that they did this, isn't that they did that. And I think the more we speak to that, the more we can make those changes that would make prison abolition more of a feasibility.
But you know what it is? Personally, I feel like, they're humans, but at the end of the day, right, we live in a society, and the only way people can have true freedom if there's law and order. Do you know what I'm trying to say? And it's true.
Sound like a Republican.
Relax, man.
Law and order. I'm the law and order candidate. The law and order candidate.
No, but I'm just saying, I'm not someone that thinks government should only focus on law and order. That's what Republicans would say. But I think that to a certain degree, people expect to be safe when they walk down the street.
But that implies that prison fills that role again. We haven't.
No. I'm not saying it does, but I'm just saying that I understand and hear what you're saying, that the prisoners banded together. But that's what human beings would do naturally.
And that's
we're rational
what
creatures.
saying.
Yeah, no.
But
I agree with that. But I just feel like getting rid of prisons is a bit too radical. I
like what you're saying. I think the culture, that's what you're talking about, the culture of our society, the brutality of it. When we had what's it called, death penalty, I'm sure some people were there saying but if we abolish the death penalty, how are we going to do someone that killed someone? We're not going to kill them back. But we don't do that now. Yeah, the war hasn't ended. Society moved on. Everything, we're actually a better society for it, because we're recognizing that it is not the role of the government to murder someone for murdering someone. That's lunacy.
You know what? You know what it is. We need to. Last point.
Yeah, I'm going to shut up in voting. In terms of what we could do, kind of what you're asking. So there's an organisation in the UK, they're the Centre for Crime and Justice Studies, and they have an initiative which they're trying to launch over the next couple of years. I spoke to you about it before. It's called After Prison, and it's looking at how land currently occupied by prisons might be redeveloped to benefit local communities. So building homes, hospitals, local business, how we can use that land to kind of invest in green energy. And I think that obviously, the feasibilities and the limitations probably, are very, they definitely exist. But I think that idea is good in the sense that from this, so this system has existed, but in terms of abolishing it and ending it, there's multiple benefits that can be reached from the community that might actually support people in not reoffending, or support people away from a life of crime, because they have that community and the land that's being reinvested to invest in them and in their people.
So it's like closing down the prison and investing the money you save to improve people's lives.
Yeah. That's
What's the charity called again? Just to give it a quick shout out to people.
The Centre for Crime and Justice Studies.
Okay, cool. So that concludes this episode of the Woke Weekly podcast. Tune in next time. We'll be discussing more issues that affect the black community. That's been the podcast. Take care.